Okay. So, as I say, I am Gemma. I learnt to ring 30 years ago, approximately, in Hampshire, in a lovely little village church of 6 bells, as it was then. Um, and it was method ringing up there. Okay, so I am not by sort of learning a call change ringer. However, I have been ringing it down here with our lovely president Owen and thoroughly enjoying it. So yeah, I have a love and a passion for both forms and styles of ringing. I would add on to, most importantly about me, is that I do not know everything. I think people see me and go, "Oh, ask Gemma. She's the education officer. She knows everything." I don't. Just to put that right out there, I really don't know everything. Um, but fortunately, the nature of ringing, we always have a really good team around us, don't we? So if I don't know something, so if we get to the end of the session today and you ask me something, I go, "Not sure on that." I will go away and talk about it with some of my ringing colleagues and try and find out some answers for you. Um, Although I don't know everything, I do thoroughly love teaching and supporting people to meet their goals. Um, oh, sorry about that. I do really enjoy helping you, and I've made some visits around the guild, particularly to Scythians. We've got the Scythians contingent with us today. There they are. And I've really thoroughly enjoyed going and supporting them, and seeing their progression has been really, really good stuff. My real job, I was a nurse before I had my children, but I now teach paediatric first aid, and teach baby massage as well. That's another thing I do. So it's all about teaching with me. Everything I do is teaching. But I'm a firm believer in the most important thing about ringing is that you enjoy it. It's got to be absolutely number one, that we have fun. So, things to consider when we are thinking about our listening skills and our striking skills. And I did a bit of research about this because, as I say, I don't know everything. So I've gone away and I've gone to various resources, including, I'm sure many of you will recognise the name Steve Coleman, and I've had a look through his book. And the number one important thing to consider when we are trying to get good striking and good listening skills is doing our theory work, doing our homework outside of the tower. Now, I will categorically say that I am hands up guilty. I very rarely have time to do this. And I understand that people have lives and jobs and other things going on, and we don't always have time to do it. But I certainly have done it in the past, and I can understand and confirm that yes, if you can do your theory work and learning your blue line, or learning whatever outside of the tower itself, at home or wherever you're going to do it, if you've got that theory in there before you walk into that tower and catch hold, that's half the battle won. And it means you're not suddenly trying to cram loads of information in before you catch hold of the rope, and it just doesn't stick in there. It just does not stay. And then mistakes happen and striking goes wrong, and etc, etc, etc. So where possible, I should have put where possible, doing your homework before you get to the tower, if possible. Number two for me, and it's a biggie actually, isn't it, is our bell handling skills. Being able to adjust your bell speed to fit in with the rhythm of the rest of the ringing. So when we're ringing in rounds, we're fairly steady. No sudden moves, as I say to my students. And if you do have to make a move, nothing too big, no massive adjustments, small increments until you get back correctly. And understanding that with bell handling, being able to place your bell faster by taking rope up and having longer tail end, catching Sally higher. If you need to ring slower, letting rope out so you're further towards the end of the tail, and possibly catching the Sally a little lower, but you don't want to get into bumping stay territory. So you may just want to catch Sally at the same normal position you would normally, and just let it rise up to the balance a little bit further and hold it. So your bell handling really does have to be good. And as I stress to my students, you must have control at all times to be able to put the bell into the right place. Number 3 is our hearing, which I suppose is fairly obvious with listening, isn't it? Listening skills. I don't necessarily mean hearing it all, so hearing the entire change or anything like that, but actually being able to pick out your own bell. And it's quite tricky, actually. I was ringing on 12 not very long ago, 12 bells, and you know, when you're in the middle on sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 of that number of bells, they all kind of just run into each other. It's very difficult to pick out and hear which your individual bell is. So I would say for hearing, if you're struggling to hear your own bell, perhaps doing some exercises on lower numbers of bells is a really good idea. When we're at Kenwyn, we quite often will ring on 4 bells, or even 3, and put your student on the 3rd bell, and then start, you know, wait until they can hear themselves, the last bell of the change, and then start adding bells in behind them, but only one at a time, and make sure they can still hear their own bell and where it is. It is difficult, and it's something really that only does come with practice. Practice, practice, practice. The next one down, this old chestnut, number 4, rope sight. God, the thing of nightmares, isn't it, rope sight? Being able to see what place you are in, and potentially what place other people are in as well. And wow, I mean, that is a whole other session. That's a whole other thing, really. I'm not going to get into masses about rope sight now. If you want a session on rope sight, I'll do one. But yeah, it literally is being able to see what place you are in within the change, and whether that be on 6 bells, 8 bells, 10, 12 bells, however many bells, knowing that I'm in 3rd place, I'm in 4th place, 5th place, etc. And what gets you double bonus is if you can see what places other bells are in as well. And a really good way of practicing rope sight is actually when you're sitting out. So when it's not your turn and you're sitting, try standing behind people, particularly the tenor. If there is something happening and someone's ringing the tenor, watch where the tenor goes, and that's a really good way, because all the tenor is looking for is the last rope down in the change, so that they can follow behind it. So that's a really good way of building rope sight skills. And for me, actually, the most important aspect of striking and how I strike my bell and sort my own striking out is via rhythm. I do the other things. I do watch, I do listen, but for me, it's a feeling of rhythm. I'm not massively musical, to be absolutely honest. I played violin in my time at school, but yeah, it's that sense of rhythm, and hopefully you've all heard it or maybe experienced it on the end of a rope yourself at one point, when you get into that lovely even, you know, even spaces between the bells, and it just taps along really nicely, and you can hear each individual bell. And I've just made a little note there about compensating for odd struckness as well. I'm not sure how many of you have odd struck bells in your tower. We certainly have some at Kenwyn, which make things quite tricky. Odd struckness is when if you were to ring a bell, you would pull it on the hand stroke, for example, and if you were ringing on any other bell, that would strike in the right place. But because you're ringing that odd struck bell, it strikes too early or it strikes too late because the clapper's hitting the bell at the incorrect time. So yeah, it's quite a difficult thing to, you know, if you don't know a bell is odd struck, if you get hold of the rope and start ringing, it's only then that you find out, and you have to adjust in real time, and that can be hard. All of these things together, all of these 5 things, really any kind of shortcomings in any of these areas will likely result in poor striking. Okay. Okay, who's heard this term in their tower or another tower? Show of hands. Who's heard it? Listen to it. Anyone heard that? Oh goodness. I spent a good number of my teen years listening to the phrase listen to it. And it's funny, isn't it, really? Because as we've just alluded to, striking is not just about listening, it's about so many other things. And I just want you to have a think about if you've heard that term before, if that term has been aimed at you or aimed at someone else, but you've heard it. Can you just have a little think about it and make a quick mental note or write something down or put it into your phone or whatever? Can you just tell me, how did it make you feel? For me personally, every time I ever had it screamed at me, it just makes you feel awful. It makes you feel demoralized, for me anyway, because I think most of us, hand on heart, will say that 99% of the time we really are trying our best. There's obviously the 1% where we've had a long day and can't be bothered, and that's fine. We're all humans, aren't we? We're not robots. But yeah, someone screaming that at you across the tower, for me, demoralizing. I really am trying my best. You screaming that at me does not make it any better. And if you've heard it in a more sort of general team setting, so maybe it wasn't aimed at you particularly, but it was just on to the whole band. What sort of effect did it have on the band, the team? For me, I've certainly, when I've heard it directed around it, bands ringing, you sort of stand at the end and there's this silence that goes over, isn't there? And bit awkward, especially if the person screaming it is really had a bit of a pop at the team. It's not ideal. It's not ideal. For me, rather than I don't scream it. I don't scream anything really, unless someone needs to let go of a rope because they've broken a stay. But for me, specific instructions are much more beneficial than just randomly shouting, "Listen to it," because if you don't say who you're talking to, well, that's problem number one, because the person making the error may not realise you're telling them to listen. So, if someone goes, listen to it, but doesn't say Jemma, I'll just carry on in my own little world. It's better to be giving clear advice. So, Jemma, your hand stroke leads are too quick. Can you hold them up a bit, please? Or can you slow them down a bit, please? Don't forget your pleases. Your P's and Q's. All right. So this is how I behave and how I would hope others would behave, with courtesy, isn't it? How do good ringers do it? So I asked the good ringers, how do you do it? How do you listen? How do you strike? What are you doing? what's your thing? Universally, they all mention rhythm and speed, which is what I alluded to. How I strike well is with rhythm. Moving their bell at the correct time to the beat of the ringing. And this is a really good thing. And actually, if you're sitting out and not ringing, you might find yourself tapping your foot along, possibly. Your foot's just going up and down and tapping to the rhythm, and that's really good. You might gently clap your hands together, not too loud so as to disturb the ringing, but yeah, you might just gently tap your hands along and get into the beat of it, much like a piece of music. Yeah, much like a piece of music. What else did they say? They're listening. They're tuning in to the sound or the pitch of their bell to identify when it strikes. So I mentioned this at the beginning, hearing, being able to hear your own bell within a change. It's so important. And if you're sitting there right now thinking, oh, I can't hear my bell, I wouldn't know which one's mine, you need to go back to the basics. Ringing on 3 or 4, probably 3 to start with. The student ringing the 3rd bell, making sure they can hear that before you then add another bell behind them, making sure they can still hear which bell they are, because obviously they won't be the last one then. And the other thing that they all mentioned, a couple of them mentioned rather, was counting. So counting each bell in the change until they got to their own place in the row. I think that particular one is quite tricky, and I do think it links in. I do think it links in a little bit with rhythm. Yeah, so it is something you can do, but it's definitely a more advanced ringer's skill that would come with time. Yeah, it does really buddy up with rhythm, the counting thing. So if you're ringing in rounds, if you're ringing bell number 4, you would sort of mentally count in your head, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and make sure you're pulling your rope at the time your bell should be striking. I will just say as well, good ringers, they don't all strike well. That would be my other observation. All of those things that those good ringers are doing take an enormous amount of time, dedication, and openness to learn. There are a few people who are built with the innate ability to strike well. I think those are the musician-y type people possibly among us. But for most of us, it's practice, practice, practice. And along with that, hand in hand, is going to the right environment. Yeah, so going to the right place, not the place where you're going to get listened to it shouted at you. Yeah, you need to be in the right environment and find the right people. Okay, so I tried to summarize in not too many bullet points what generally causes striking errors. And I did this by watching my students at Kenwyn to see what was happening with them and what they were doing. Categorically, big bells were too wide over smaller bells, and smaller bells were too close over bigger bells. This is all to do with the bigger the bell you have, the longer it takes to swing and strike. The smaller the bell you have, the quicker it is to swing and strike. So yeah, if you have big bells ringing over little bells, you've got to ring those big bells a lot closer in. So you may almost be pulling your rope virtually at the same time as a small bell, and vice versa. Small bells going over big bells are going to have to wait, because that big bell needs time to swing. So the gap you leave is going to be so huge. You're like, oh my God, that's not going to sound good, but it's perfect. So, and it does sit in there with rhythm as well. Poor sense of rhythm is the next one. Poor sense of rhythm out of rounds might be a poor sense of rhythm in rounds. The treble and the tenor are so important. When you have students in your band, try to put steady people on the treble and the tenor to assist with the establishment of a good rhythm. If you have those 2 bells in the right place, you stand much better chance of getting the rounds nice. But out of rounds as well, when you start swapping the bells over, people are having to hold up to go over other bells, pull in to go under other bells, and it all just gets a little bit erratic. Lethargic dodging and erratic leading. This is all part of the lack of rhythm. And we already mentioned odd struckness as well. I think we just must always try to remember to leave those even gaps. And I don't mean visually leaving an even gap between your pull. It's everything. The visual, but listening. Am I a little bell? Am I a big bell? Am I odd struck or not? And try to maintain the distance. So how can we get it better? Because it's all very well saying these are the issues, but what do we do about it? Well, I've already talked about ringing rounds on lower numbers of bells, 3 or 4, until you hear it. And when you can hear each bell, your bell, adding 1 bell at the back. So going up to 4 or 5 bells. Can you hear your bell? Add another bell, 5 or 6 bells until you run out of bells. Another really good little game that we've played that I used to play was to ring facing outwards from the center of the circle. So you can do this a couple. There's no right or wrong. You can do it any way you want, really. But we all used to face out and just go for it. That's a little bit, can be a bit tricky. But you could just have maybe one person facing out. So have a nice steady treble and a nice steady tenor. And then, yeah, just have one person turning around and facing outwards and letting them have a go. And then they turn back and then the next one turns around and has a little go. And then they turn back and then the next bell turns around and has a go. Obviously, in some towers, this may be difficult to achieve on some bells or all bells if they're very close to walls and things like that. So I'm not saying everyone may be able to achieve this, but it's just something to think about. If you cannot see the bell you're following, you lose that visual. You're going to have to listen and tap to rhythm. We've got incremental rounds and diminishing rounds. So again, these are really nice games to play. With incremental rounds, I would start with 3 bells, 2 bells plus your tenor. So if you have a ring of 6, for example, you could ring the treble and the 2, and then someone do ring the tenor. You put your student on the number 2 bell, ring your rounds, and then, yeah, just add your 4th bell in and then your 5th bell, and so on and so on. The diminishing rounds is more if someone's already ringing and they can't hear their bell. So you're ringing rounds on 6. You want 1 bell to set at a time. So get the tenor to set. Can they hear their bell yet? No. Get the 5th to set. Can they hear their bell? Get the 4th to set. Can they hear their bell? If they're on the 3, hopefully at that point they probably can hear their bell. If they can't, get the 4 to set, and then they become the last bell. So they really should be able to hear that. There's something called crash and gap, which is good, yes. However, I would exercise caution with this. I wouldn't advocate perhaps striking poorly on purpose. As I say, we do have neighbours and people do know the difference between good striking and poor striking. If you're in the middle of nowhere, if you're fortunate to have a tower with no neighbours, then that's fine. If you have a simulator, then that's fine. But yeah, ringing on opposite strokes is a really good one. Sometimes we can end up on opposite strokes by accident. We don't mean to be on the opposite stroke, but there we are. And it's funny because then you listen to it and you go, oh, but it actually sounds all right. It sounds like I'm in rounds, which you are, but you're on the opposite stroke. Now, from a training point of view, it's actually a very good thing to practice doing on purpose. So you ring rounds and alternate the bells. So the treble would be pulling on the hand stroke, and the 2 would be on a backstroke, and the 3 would be on a hand stroke, and the 4 would be on a backstroke. So you alternate hand back, hand back, hand back until you run out of bells. And try and ring in rounds and get the sound. Make it sound like rounds, but you're ringing on opposite strokes every single bell. It's very hard, but it's a really good test of your listening skills and taking away that looking at the rope, looking at the gaps factor, which if they're struck is not going to help you. And I've alluded to this already, haven't I? The right atmosphere. There's no point shouting at people, shouting across the tower. People just get stressed. Some of you may have written that down as to the feelings being shouted at, brought out in you. Stress levels rise, don't they? Calm ringers produce better striking. I know myself, when I'm feeling a little bit on edge, a little bit nervous about what I'm doing, the first thing to go is my striking. If I take some deep breaths and I try and stay calm, my striking comes back a little bit. So it's simple, isn't it? It's not just in ringing, it's in everyday life, everything we do. If we're stressed, we don't tend to do so well. If we're calm, we can focus, things generally are better. And if you do have to say something in the middle of ringing, I'm not saying you can't say something. I'm not saying you cannot talk to someone whilst they're ringing. And it may be you do have to raise your voice simply to be heard over the bells. And that's okay. But it's about the tone. Yeah, it's the tone you're putting with it. And it's very obvious to people on the receiving end, if they're on the receiving end of an angry tone of shouting, or on a supportive tone, yeah, of a raised voice. It's two very different things. Okay, so I'm going to try and open up these videos. This is where the technical techie could all go a bit wrong, couldn't it? We'll see what happens. Okay. Okay, so you won't have been able to see that video. That's fine, because this is a listening skills exercise. Could everyone hear it okay? Thumbs up. Probably should have checked that. Yeah, cool. Okay. Can you guys just have a little think about what you've just heard, and I'll play a little snippet more of it for you. Can you tell me what you think about the striking? If there's anything obvious you can pick out that's maybe consistently incorrect. Again, there's no right or wrong answers, but it's just to generate a bit of discussion at the end of the session. So I'll just play a little bit more. Hey, I've also made some notes. Okay, so I'm going to get you guys to listen to another one now. Just bear with me. I have termed it what we can all try and aim for. There you go. That's a very nice way of putting it, isn't it? So yeah, something to aim for. And I've had this discussion a couple of times in the last few weeks about how, you know, when you have potentially new starters, new ringers coming into your tower, if you don't have a particularly strong band in your tower. We don't have a particularly strong band at Kenwyn at the moment. We have lots of students. It's difficult to give them good examples of good striking in our own tower because we don't have the strength in the band to demonstrate that. So if you're in a similar situation, just have a little think about it now. Or if you're a student, you know, have you heard an example of really good striking? Do you know what it sounds like? Do you know what we're aspiring to? And let's have a listen to this one. This is what we could be aspiring to. This is on 12 bells, but don't worry so much about that. This could be on any number of bells. Did you all hopefully everyone heard the beautiful ring it? Yes. Oh, I don't know if you could see me whilst that was going on, but I was like this. Right. You can see me now, can't you? I was like this, nodding along. It's like innate. I can't stop it. As soon as it came on, I was like, like that. Rhythm, isn't it? Such a huge thing. Rhythm. It's so important. So what I would have got you guys to do, if you weren't already doing it, perhaps were to make a few notes about that ringing, that really, really lovely ringing. I don't dare put it back on because, you know, look what happened to the laptop. But, you know, hopefully you can remember how wonderful it was. And just have a think about it and maybe write a few notes down about what you thought about that, how it sounded, what it had that the other one didn't. Yeah, all good things to think about. I think it's a good time to maybe have some questions. Has anyone got any questions? Any thoughts? Any comments? Any musings about striking or listening? Anything that's been burning in your brain? Go for it. Let me know. Tell me. Ask me. We can discuss as a group, which is really lovely. Thank you for watching our Zoom on listening and striking. A number of the questions needed to be off the recording to protect GDPR. There were lots of interesting questions, lots of thoughts on the striking from the examples that we saw during the presentation. If you have any questions about striking or listening skills or would like any advice from the Acting Education Officer for your guild, then do please get in contact, education@tdgr.org.uk. Bye.